Newsfirst, Newsline.
A very good evening to you. You're watching a brand new edition of Newsline. As always, we have an interesting guest here in the studios that we have set up in the MTV head office. Now, Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka, welcome back. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
It's great to have you back.
Good to be back.
A lot of interesting things happening
Absolutely.
in Sri Lanka, around the world. So I want to start off from home and then maybe travel to the US and then talk about the problems there as well. Doctor, we are suffering as a result of COVID-19, a lot of things happening, a lot of industries have been affected with this current situation. Now, you have a plethora of experience when it comes to handling diplomatic matters. Here in Sri Lanka, there has been a lot of setups that have been put in place to sort of make sure things run smoothly. Now, in your experience, I just want to open this like this. In your experience, do you think too many cooks spoil the soup?
Well, I think there's a problem, but I don't think the problem is one of too many cooks. If you're looking at the bigger picture, I was amazed at the appointment of 2 new presidential task forces. One had a splendid title, to create a secure, virtuous, disciplined society. Now, you don't appoint a presidential task force for a grand theme like that. A task force is for a specific target, a limited target. But this is a very grand theme. And the 13 members are entirely military or police. Now, the creation of a secure, virtuous and disciplined society is, in a republic, which is a democracy, a matter for the elected representatives of the people, starting with the president and then the prime minister and, the cabinet and the parliament. That's who have been entrusted, mandated by the constitution for these big picture things such as changing society. I'm not sure that it's even constitutional. It's certainly not, it doesn't have any precedent to appoint a presidential task force for something so large, because everything and the kitchen sink has been thrown into that. Now, there's a reference to the prisons and drug trafficking, which is fine. If it were just a task force to combat drug trafficking and reform the prisons, that's fine. But this is not what it is. So I'm confused as to who people report to. Because officials are supposed to report to the task force, and the task force can reach out to the officials. And anything can come under a secure, disciplined and virtuous society. So what happens to the PM? What happens to the cabinet? The PM is not on this. So I think that the chain of command is not clear. I don't know what's going to happen when there is eventually a parliamentary election and a new parliament. And that's my worry. It's not that there are too many cooks. It's that there is a complete paradigm shift away from the civil service, I mean the public sector, public administration, where people, say in a certain field, call it customs, call it whatever. I mean, you enter through a process of examinations, and then you move up through seniority. You become some kind of an expert in your field. Some of those areas have dedicated examinations. But now, everybody comes from somewhere else, the military basically, or ex-military. So I don't see what the role of the public service is anymore. That is my problem. It's a systemic problem. There's something happening. The system is being unilaterally changed in a period where there is no sitting parliament, in a vacuum. So as a political scientist, I wonder what the implications will be, and this cannot but lead to certain dysfunctionalities. It's supposed to make it more efficient and streamlined, but what you actually have, what you will have, are multiple dysfunctionalities as you go along.
Isn't it because there is no active parliament that these things might be taking place? Because all of these things that you mentioned, obviously when the parliament is there, you can raise questions, there is this accountability process taking place, but now we see a situation where at this moment we do not know when the election will be held. And in a situation like that, shouldn't there be someone taking control? And isn't that why these task forces are being appointed, in your opinion?
No, I don't see a problem there because, you know, the president has been elected, we have the president, and we have the Prime Minister, because even when the Parliament is dissolved, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are still intact.
Yeah.
So you have the President, you have the PM, a very experienced person, probably one of the most experienced in the whole of Asia as far as politicians go. And then you have a Cabinet, and you have the public administration, the civil service. And of course, if you have a security problem, you have the army and so on. So I'm happy that the Supreme Court has cleared the way for a new election. And all of this has been taking place in between sitting parliaments. But it didn't have to be that way at all.
Right.
The President and the PM and the Cabinet could have handled this.
This brings us to another interesting place. Now, you spoke about this systematic problem that has arisen as a result. Now, we are looking at an example today where a diplomatic staffer of an embassy has gone out of the airport without carrying out a PCR test, which was a regulation set by the government for all people arriving in Sri Lanka, for all tourists basically. Now, again, there seems to be, yes, there is a system in place, yes, there are officials, task forces being appointed, but there seems to be these gaps. I mean, if you were a High Commissioner to one of the very powerful countries, allies of Sri Lanka. Now, when it comes to this, the diplomatic community and the privileges that you hold and COVID-19, they are two different things, isn't it, Doctor? And do they have a connection? I mean, it doesn't look very nice in terms of the country, because there is a system in place, there is a process, and there are things that happen in between. So why should the people have any trust in the system in the first place?
Well, this is an anomalous situation, COVID-19, a pandemic.
Yeah.
The usual processes and procedures don't cover it. But then what you have to do is, since you know that it's unusual and that diplomats may be coming through, you then have a meeting which brings in the Sri Lankan Foreign Ministry, as well as you can have a teleconference, the embassy involved, and you work out, because there are obviously gray areas.
Yeah.
So I really don't blame anybody, because I've been ambassador 3 times. And of course you're taken through the VIP channel. You're not subject to the usual procedures.
Sure.
But on the other hand, you do have a legitimate health problem. So it has to be interagency cooperation. If there is no such integration, then there are gaps. And there will be gaps in this kind of unusual, it's a highly exceptional situation.
Right.
But now we've been living with this for some time, and we shall have to live with it for some time more. It's about time that there was interagency integration on these matters.
And Doctor, now, interestingly, during the previous government, during the current government, there were talks of these various agreements that are coming into place with powerful nations, and even recently former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe had mentioned that Sri Lanka should maybe go into a trade deal with India. There is a lot of attention still. I want to now focus on the international aspect as well. There is a lot of attention on Sri Lanka even as we speak, and we are talking about the debt crisis and all of that is happening. But if certain countries try to show their muscle, if certain countries show, we are powerful than you are, or we are powerful than your other allies, isn't that going to be a problem? Because Friends with All policy has worked for a lot of countries, and it has worked for Sri Lanka. Has it worked for Sri Lanka? And are we looking at certain countries and are we like, okay, we fear this country and we are friends with this country? Is that the policy that we are taking right now?
Well, the policy that we should have, and we have had in certain periods of our contemporary history is a policy of omnidirectionality. It doesn't mean equidistance.
Yeah.
It means, to use one of the Russian phrases, multi-vector. So it's omnidirectional. And our policy of non-alignment has served us well. Now the non-aligned movement may be in some kind of ebb, but it's like a trade union. Sometimes the trade union is weak, a trade union at other times is strong. But the principles of non-alignment have helped us, and they should be a guideline.
Sure.
But there again, we have had two deviations. One is under the Ranil Wickremesinghe Mangala Samaravira period. There was a change when Mr. Tilak Marapan was made foreign minister. I think there was an improvement. And we got back, at least we moved back in the direction of our traditional foreign policy. But during the Ranil Mangala period, which was 2015 to I think 2018 or 2017, we became a doormat for the West. And now we have, and that was one extreme.
Sure.
Now we have another extreme where the president has virtually threatened to walk out of the UN Human Rights Council if they say anything that we don't like to hear. There's a new term, neutral. Now neutral and non-aligned are two different things. What does neutral mean? Why aren't we non-aligned anymore? The non-aligned movement, which we chaired at one time, has never used the term neutrality. So there's confusion, there's a conceptual confusion. I think the confusion comes because the last government and this new government have both been, and this government is, hyper ideological. Whereas previous governments, whether they were UNP, SLFP, President Mahinda Rajapaksa, or his predecessors, Chandrika, they have been not exactly driven by ideology.
Yeah.
The previous UNP government, that's the Wickremesinghe government, Wickremesinghe Mangala Samaravira's foreign minister, was neoliberal. And the present government of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa belongs in what I call the Trump, Bolsonaro, Netanyahu triangle. It's not the traditional non-aligned, third worldist foreign policy of Mahinda Rajapaksa, which I served as ambassador twice over. So I was very familiar with that foreign policy. This is a different foreign policy. It's far more angular, it's far more rigid. It distrusts the United Nations. Now Mahinda Rajapaksa would never have said, we are going to walk out of the UN Human Rights Council. Because that's the World Parliament for Human Rights. You fight it out there if you have to, which I did. But you don't walk out of it. But we walked out of the resolution. The resolution was a bad one, but it was precipitate to just pull out unilaterally. We should have moved amendments and then perhaps try to repeal it through another resolution. I must say at this point that I think that Dinesh Gunawardene is a wonderful foreign minister. But foreign policy, the doctrine, is not being decided by Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardene. So we have a shift. I'll end this comment with a very simple suggestion to any government, including the government of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Here is my suggestion. If ever you want to do something in foreign policy, you want to make a move, ask yourself one question. What would Lakshman Kadirgama have said or done? That's the only question you have to ask yourself. What did he say? And if it doesn't cover what you're dealing with, what would Lakshman Kadirgama have done or said? If you ask yourself that question and give or find an honest answer, you can't go too far wrong.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
President instructs officials to subject all who arrive from overseas to PCR tests. and to direct them for quarantine based on test results. Who is the American diplomat who refused to undergo the PCR test upon arrival at the BIA? Mount Lavinia Beach engulfed in waste material. Another coal power plant to be constructed in Norochole.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back to the show. You're watching Newsline. We were in conversation with Dr. Tilaka. Before we went into the break, we spoke a lot about the Sri Lankan context. Now I want to focus the attention to some of the international matters that are happening around us. Let's quickly go to India, Doctor. Now, President Narendra Modi has been very vocal about the COVID-19 situation. We have had several teleconferences with the SAARC regional country heads, various representatives of SAARC. But if you analyze the situation, because India is a powerful nation in the SAARC region and neighbor to us Sri Lankans, Indians do not seem very happy about Narendra Modi's approach towards matters happening in India. Rather, if you just go through social media and if you just analyze what has been happening, Indian people say that Narendra Modi is limited to making teleconferences with leaders around or in the SAARC region, whereas he's not working for the people in India. Now, this has a direct impact to Sri Lanka as well, because we are a member of the SAARC and we tend to look at India for a lot of things, for a lot of examples. What is your opinion on this, and how the SAARC region has been led by PM Narendra Modi?
Well, let's talk about Corona, because you started off with the management of Corona. Look, I mean, India has over 1 billion people. It's not easy to manage, and it's a democracy. It's a federal democracy, quasi-federal democracy. And whether Prime Minister Modi has done it right or not, we will be able to see at the next elections. I think he has been very inspirational in the way that he has kept speaking to the people.
Right, right.
Frankly, I sometimes watch him. I don't understand the language, but I watch him because there's something in the way he speaks. He's a wonderful communicator. But if we are talking about Corona or COVID-19, I'll tell you what really surprises me. I know I must be sounding a very old guy, but in my generation and the previous one, we were very happy to say that we are very similar to Kerala, and Kerala was very happy to say that they were similar to Sri Lanka, and there are similarities. So it used to be, are we more similar to Kerala or to Bengal? I mean, Bengal was a bit of a reach, but Kerala, yes. Those of us who have visited, you could tell that. And the statistics show that the state of Kerala has been as successful as New Zealand in the management of COVID-19.
Correct.
No military involved.
Yeah.
It's been the Chief Minister, the Minister of Health. Of course, it's run by an elected left-wing coalition. There is that. And it's a very educated area, Kerala. But the MIT, I've read the stuff, the MIT has written about the Kerala model, the Kerala success of fighting COVID-19. Now, I don't understand why I never hear that in the Sri Lankan discussion. It's very clear, everybody knows it, the statistics don't lie, and it's been recognized internationally, but we are neighbors. We used to be very close, and geographically we are very close to Trivandrum, I mean to Kerala. Why don't we reach out to Kerala and say, look, Chief Minister, can you send your people who busted this to come over, sit down.
Teach us what to do.
Yeah, sit down and talk, or at least have a teleconference with Kerala and compare notes, see how they got it so right, so early.
Sure.
And now they're in the clear. Come on, this is just next door to us. Why don't we do that? So if you're looking at India, as I said, over 1 billion people, I'm surprised that they've managed to keep the death rate down as they have.
Yeah, compared to other highly
compared
populated.
to the first world.
Yeah.
But there's a shining success in the well-known state of Kerala in India. And I think we should learn from them, and we should reach out to them.
And again, the United States of America, a lot happening there with the George Floyd protests happening now. This problem of racism is common not only to the United States of America. I mean, we see it here in our country as well. But this particular instance has taken a turn, and the people are acting against the authorities, and we are seeing sort of a, I can't call it a unique instance, but we have seen this in the past, but this seems to be more heightened. I want to ask you this. Now, a lot of media attention has been drawn to this. Social media, world over, people are talking about this, and world over, people are starting to copy what's happening in the United States as well. Why is this happening to this extent now?
You know, for some time, by which I mean for about a year, serious intellectuals, commentators, opinion makers, analysts have been saying that we are at what is known as an inflection point in history. Basically, it's a hinge point.
Right.
Something is happening in the world today. I mean, there are those who give metaphysical explanations, but the non-metaphysical sort of analysis is that there is a confluence of factors which is making this a hinge point.
Right.
World history is changing right now as we speak. It can change for the better or for the worse. The killing of George Floyd took place against that backdrop of things changing in the world. The corona pandemic has raised questions across the world about what kind of domestic and international order we need. I mean, there are those, such as some in Sri Lanka, I think the dominant view in Sri Lanka, not necessarily the view of most people, but the dominant ideological view has been that you need a more nationalist model, you know, pull back, involuted.
Yeah.
What I call the Sigiriya syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Right. But in other parts of the world, the best minds have been saying, surely it's obvious this is affecting humanity as a whole. If a problem can affect humanity as a whole, the solutions have to include humanity as a whole, not just nation states.
Sure.
It's not just one nation state or another. It's humanity as a whole that's being affected. It impacts worst on the poor, including in the United States, and that's one of the things that's fed into the protests.
Yep.
Because most of the people who've been dying have been from the African American and Hispanic communities in the inner cities. So in every country, and including in Sri Lanka, because I watch your news, I can see what's happening in the rural areas and among people below or hovering around the poverty line. So the question of inequality has come up.
Sure.
The question of global solutions, of international solutions has come up, that we need a new international model, not just a nationalist model, but a new national model also, that gets away from the profit motive or privileging profit and looking at public welfare. So all of these discussions have been taking place. They've been taking place before the corona crisis. They've been taking place since Bernie Sanders put public health on the agenda. And now it's been proven right, though he's not the candidate anymore. Yeah. It's being proven right. So how should we order our societies? What is happening in each country and to the world? What about the climate change crisis? The best minds are saying, look, if a virus can affect us like this, can you imagine what's going to happen to humanity if there's a climate change crisis? And we've been seeing fires in the Amazon. The Pope, His Holiness Pope Francis, had a synod of bishops to discuss the Amazon crisis and put forward social reforms, saying you need a different model. So all of this is in the melting pot today. The Trump factor is also important because President Trump represents what was a new wave. I mean, Sri Lanka is part of that new wave, but it's no longer a new wave globally. The new wave of ultranationalism, right-wing authoritarianism that didn't quite sweep the globe, but you can see it manifested itself in the Boris Johnson victory, the Trump victory for sure, Bolsonaro in Brazil. But now the model is in crisis.
Right.
What has happened in the United States, I mean, Trump was the inspiration even for the new regime in Sri Lanka, ideologically speaking. The main ideologues, the driving factors, the TV stations, I mean, you've got the local equivalents of Fox News, and I'm not talking about you guys. It was a Trump thing. But now that model is in trouble. It's being challenged. It's being challenged on the streets, but not only on the streets. Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, had a press conference in the Pentagon and disagreed with President Trump about, now this is very important, about whether or not the president should deploy the armed forces, the United States military, in managing law and order on the streets. Mark Esper, the current defense secretary, had a press conference in the Pentagon, and he said that the military of a country should be involved or brought into law and order issues only as the very last resort. And that too, I'm paraphrasing, actually I'm quoting, and that too is only if the problem, the law and order problem, has reached a certain high level of intensity which the police cannot handle. And therefore, he said, I am opposed. Now this is dissent at the top, the Secretary of Defense. And the former Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, has also come out and said that it is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Four-star generals, former four-star generals have come out. It's been leaked that the Pentagon is not happy about this because those guys, being very smart, they know that if you bring the military out, of course 1,600 military men have already been deployed in Washington, D.C. Because the president has a right under a law, an amendment that was passed in 1807 called the Insurrection Act. But the Pentagon and the other guys, all Republicans, and most of these are right-wing people, but they're very smart, and they know that if you deploy a professional military on the streets, however popular they may and loved they may be, something can happen, and if that something happens, then there's a rift between the people and the military. And they don't want that. They're saying that, Mark Esper and former generals are saying this because they care for the military, not because they don't care for the military. And they don't want the president to bring in the military into matters of law and order on the streets of the United States.
Yep.
So all of this is boiling. And one final point. It all happens this year because the US presidential election is this year in November, unless he tries to postpone it. If it goes one way, if Trump is re-elected, for instance, Noam Chomsky is one of those who has said that, the future of humanity, of organized human life on the planet, will be jeopardized if Trump is re-elected.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't believe in climate change. He doesn't believe it's happening. But, well, if he's re-elected, you're going to have a huge crisis of a different sort. But if Joe Biden wins, which is looking possible because he's 6 percentage points ahead, then there will be implications all over the world for Trump-like or Bolsonaro-like regimes.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the time frame that we have for the show. It was definitely interesting to talk to you, and I hope to catch you again soon on one of our programs. It's been wonderful to have you with us. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Saturang Hapwaras.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Newsfirst, Newsline.